Welcome back to the Balancing Act podcast. I'm Andy Tempe. On the Balancing Act, we talk to business leaders and industry experts to explore the balancing acts we play in our professional lives and learn about the events that put rocket boosters behind their career success. Today, we have Eric Stone joining us. Eric is founder and chief executive of Clear Path Ventures and author of Jumpstart Your Workplace Culture, a roadmap for igniting high performance. He was also a regional VP for Enterprise Holdings for over 26 years. So I think we're going to hear a lot about that today. Welcome to the show, Eric.
Andy, pleasure to be here. Thanks for the kind introductions and excited to have the conversation.
It's going to be great. And this is part of a mini-series that we're running on workplace culture specifically. So I'm really interested in what you have to say today. Eric, but before we get started, we ask this question of all our guests. Please tell our listeners your story.
Okay. So, I'll go back to the beginning of where the love of business came in. And it all started from my parents. Father was a textile salesman. Used to eavesdrop when I was a young guy growing up and hearing his stories when he'd come back from a big business trip. And my mother was a teacher who was all about coaching, training, caring about individuals at a high level. And I really took kind of their skill set and used my love of business. So I was the odd jobs guy for running his own business growing up, and everything you could attempt to do. I enjoyed doing it. I loved the interaction. Went to college for business at Roger Williams. And since the Boston Red Sox weren't hiring for a GM at the time, though they just filled that position now, I got lucky. I landed into a company called Enterprise. At that time, Enterprise Rent-A-Car, which became Enterprise Holdings, and they just changed to Enterprise Mobility. I was fortunate to be one of four in an office, starting out my career, having a chance to learn throughout all those years, to eventually having a chance to be part of the Southern New England region within Enterprise. And we were fortunate to have a lot of accolades and recognition about balance. Speaking of what you talk a bit about, how do you get balance within an organization from those core areas? And then I remember a reflection of interview questions I used to get asked. Eric, what did you and your team do to build this unique sales culture, service culture, organizational culture? And that always was in the back of my mind. And so I eventually hung up my enterprise cleats after, as you said, a long journey into an opportunity to spread the word. Instead of to a couple hundred people, I wanted to spread my message to maybe tens or hundreds of thousands of people, not just the message, but ability to help them impact their organizations. And in between that, created a Clear Path Ventures to help people create a clear path to success, do some speaking and all of that stuff. And a book is formed with all of those, I guess you could say, lessons learned.
There you go. And the book is above your left shoulder there. Yes,
That's
absolutely. Right. Eric, if you had to pick one event in your life that just put rocket boosters behind your career, what is that event?
If it was one, and there's probably several, but I will tell you, when I first began my career, it was actually hard. I was actually in a stressful environment in the beginning because I just didn't know anything. And I ran into one individual who actually showed me the whys, and he taught me why we were making decisions. And that really impacted me because it made sense. And I always learned that lesson, that if I can help people understand the why behind what we're doing, it will help create what it did for me, was this love and continued passion for business. And so that one thing was that individual, who was to this day someone I would lean on as a mentor, really helped me understand what goes behind the business. So instead of just saying, hey, go sell, why is it important to sell, or whatever it might have been? That was probably one of the bigger things that really helped shift my management style and leadership approach.
Yes, the mentors in our lives, they are so important, and yet so many of us do not take the initiative to cultivate those mentorship relationships. So, I'm sure we'll be talking about that throughout today's discussion. Eric, let's dive in. Talk about your new book in workplace culture. What prompted you to write Jumpstart? And can you define organizational culture from your perspective? What does organizational culture mean to you?
Yeah, so I would go back to the genesis of the book was really that common question that was coming up throughout my career, really inspired me to kind of try to put something pen to paper. And so that was maybe some of the inspiration and love of bringing a group of people together, whether it was a sports organization or a business, to achieve this kind of unique, special, sustained excellence or result. For me, I wonder if I look at it differently, but if I had to define what organizational culture is, it's really behaviors and action. So just three simple words that to me are very trainable. And so when I say trainable, if they're behaviors and you can train people to execute behaviors, and when you execute those really good behaviors over an extended period of time, you create this consistent experience. That consistent experience leads to hopefully the positive right outcomes. Those right outcomes become contagious. And so if I had to look at organizational culture, behaviors and action is probably the simplest form of a definition for me.
And so behaviors, actions, what sets your book apart from the literal sea of business books that focus on culture? If you go on Amazon and type in book and culture, there are just so many of them. What sets yours apart?
I think there were a few, and that was the big thing before I even took that journey of the book. Is if I'm going to do this, it has to be something slightly different. I mean, it is hard to reinvent things. So I'll give you an example. When you want to get in shape, guess what? You want to sleep well, eat well, and work out. I mean, we all know that, but right. So it's simple. The execution of everything is not so simplistic. Simple approach, not so simplistic. Same with building this high performance culture. In my opinion, and there are an amazing amount of books out there, I felt there were a lot of these abstract theories and philosophical approaches too. I was very much a practitioner of not just theorizing on something, but providing a practical roadmap with many of my initiatives or approaches and specific examples of how you do that. And I think what I opened up with is this unique culture is misunderstood. I think it has a bad rap for some reason. I think people think it's soft and sensitive. And while those are components of it, I love your balance theory of, in my opinion, this empathy with accountability, this relationships with results, building something of high character with high standards. And so to me, those are just a few things. I think the other big thing was an ability to measure culture differently. And so I looked at a baseline that organizations can do to take a look at the health of their organization. And those are just a few things that I think separate it.
Yeah. Not to take too much of a 90-degree turn here, but do you believe that culture comes from the top, from the C-suite, from the CEO, or can I, as an individual contributor, make a difference?
Yeah, I think it starts from the top. I think in order for it, as I write about these, you have to have these culture carriers. You have to have those mid-level individuals who are really in the action every day. To assist with the building of it. So I think, the values and the behaviors that go behind the values are hopefully orchestrated from a high level. They have to live it, of course. Right. But what my struggle was, and then about you, Andy, is as I grew within a company, people wouldn't stay with the company because of me as I became an officer of the company. It was really because of all those who were doing the hard work. And so you really depend on these others to carry out the message and to live those behaviors in action.
Right. So let's talk balancing acts. It's the name of the podcast. If you're a corporate decision maker, likely the chief human resources officer who's in charge of improving an existing organization's cultural landscape, what's the most important balancing act that you as the CHRO must consider before diving into a cultural transformation?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the simplest approach was always, and it's the simplest listen, observe, and learn process. And so I actually use an hourglass throughout the book that defines an approach of what people can utilize. And at the top of an hourglass really is this first phase. First of all, you got to celebrate the successes the organization has had. It probably isn't all bad if there's a struggling one. And so really celebrating some of those things that are working, and then getting a deep understanding from board members, clients, customers, stakeholders, employees, and really trying to synthesize. So as the hourglass eventually comes out, you're taking all this information and eventually trying to synthesize to create clarity. But for me, the first phase is really about trust. It's about relationship building instead of, and as you know, with an hourglass, the word hour, us, our, together, not an eyeglass like we both have, which would be I. And so the top of that hourglass really is important. That's that discovery piece before you just come in and try to change the world.
Is that your version of there's no I in team?
That is my version.
The hourglass.
That's right. That's the simplest way I could. I'm a simple thinker, so
that's wonderful. Most people are listening to this and not able to see what you're talking about. So just to spell it out for everybody, it's the word hour as in hourglass, but the H and then the hour as in the culture is ours. Am I interpreting that correctly?
You are spot on. Yeah. And it's the top part of the when you think of an hourglass, just the tip of the top. Now, what's interesting about the hourglass, of course, is on each side, you'll normally have something that is the foundation of it. To the left of the foundation, those pillars that will come down, for those who can't watch this, is one side is mission, vision, values, which are going to guide your decisions. And the other pillar, of course, is policies and procedures that also will guide your decisions. And so there's a little more to the hourglass, but I'm sure we might have an opportunity to hit it as we continue to talk.
Awesome. Well, Eric, we're going to take a really short commercial break and we'll be right back. Hi, I'm Andy Temte. Over the past 35 years, I've learned a lot about business leadership, and I'd like to share those lessons with you. Ask yourself, how do I create an effective, sustainable management operating system? How do I design smooth workflows to better serve the customer? How do I balance organizational trust with accountability? The Balanced Business describes the practical, step-by-step process you need to answer these questions. Order your copy today wherever books are sold. And we're back with Eric Stone talking about the world of corporate culture. Let's run a little thought experiment. I love to do these. Eric, suppose you're talking to a mid-level manager or an individual contributor who's working in a business or institution who believes their company's corporate culture is suboptimal. They likely feel stuck and certainly a degree of powerless. What advice do you have for this individual or for this mid-level manager to make a difference?
Yeah, great question, Andy. The recommendation I'd give is start within the four walls you exist. So, depending on if, your team is 4, 5, 8, team, department, whatever it is, I think it's important that you start right there. And I think it's important that you live those values within the organization, that they're at least espousing. It might not be actually happening, and so I'd say start there. I would then say seek others. So you got to seek out that mentor, seek others out who are in alignment with. Because again, just because there's some challenges within a culture does not mean everything is broken. And so now that you've got your four walls that you're living, you've now seeked others out. You also then eventually need to be a culture carrier of your own, and you need to kind of work your way out to spread the message. So inner four walls, seek others out, and then be some of the voice. And then I always use this simple ABCs of communication when I talk about building culture. The A is the amplify. That's the easy thing. When things are really exciting or going well, the company has something really special. I definitely want to amplify that to my team. It is posted on every wall, on the back of someone's shirt. I mean, you got to have fun with it and amplify the message. Yeah. Where the B and C come in is the buffer is really important, because sometimes there's some noise. I call it, you have to be the distraction catcher. You've got to be able to remove the noise and create clarity, like in an hourglass, right, where that sand goes through. It's very simple. It's easy. I get it. And then there's components you're just going to pass on or convey. And that C is you'll learn to convey some of those things that I call the ESPNs, the did you knows. And so if you can use some of those things, I think that's a really good start to help build a culture for that individual.
One of the things I like about your hourglass approach is at the very top, you are not assuming that everything is broken. And it is so easy for us as human beings to amplify the negative, to look at what's wrong, and to then make the assumption that everything is wrong, everything is broken, everything is a problem. So starting with what's working and then building from there, very, very, very smart.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know in any time I've either taken over a struggling opportunity or guided somebody, there's some pretty impressive things that were going on,
Right.
and you do want to have a chance to memorialize and celebrate. So absolutely.
Yeah, and a lot of leaders, and the leaders who are listening to this, just remember when you come in, you don't have to throw everything out and start from scratch. Look for what's working first and celebrate that. I think that's an important lesson for this show. Eric, let's run another small thought experiment. Now you've got a CEO sitting right in front of you right now who's been, quote unquote, sold a few times on what they've begin to view as gimmicky programs to improve corporate culture, and nothing's really moved the needle. They don't want to give up, but the frustration is building throughout the organization. There's been a flavor of the week that's been, trying to be installed. What advice do you have for this CEO to put them on the path to success?
So the first thing I would do is I would want to really define what gimmicky is, because I want to get a good understanding, because gimmicky is a word that makes it almost like I don't believe in it. So there's been some other salespeople who came in and tried to schmooze me on, but that's the wrong approach. That is, of course, that is not what. And so I would really wonder, number one, what was gimmicky about it? What wasn't working? Number two, so the gimmick. What are the things that you feel weren't working, and why are there so many flavors of the week? And so I'd have to dig in first, and then I would eventually try to say, what are your priorities? I mean, what are the things that in the hourglass, what are those things that everyone should be saying the same thing about? And that is like the first introductory. And those responses, of course, are going to change where this goes. I'd start there.
Yeah. I really like how you reframed the gimmick as likely bias and skepticism on the part of this CEO, and these built-in biases that we all have, that the CEO's lens has been viewing whatever has been tried or put in front of them as a gimmick, because there's just that built-in non-belief to begin with.
Yeah. Very, again, whether sometimes it's body language, sometimes it's the words we choose, really tells you a lot. It's even like the interview process. There's such an art and a science to interviewing, but that already would really be what I call a tell, or like in a poker game or something. Something's not adding up. I don't love that word choice. Doesn't mean it's wrong. Doesn't mean they didn't misspeak. But I need to understand why it's gimmicky.
Right. Yeah. That's very, very good advice. Now let's have some fun. I'm going to put you in a time machine. You can send a message to an earlier version of Eric Stone. What's the message, and what previous version of yourself do you choose to send it to?
Okay, so this could go a couple different directions. If it goes that I am, I'd say 1980 before Apple's IPO, I'd probably say tell Eric that the Apple IPO put his mom and dad's money and his bar mitzvah money into a kitty, and let it ride. Step one. Right. If it was for more, seriousness of, what are the things that I think could really help is, and I know I still struggle with it, and Andy, I don't know if you do, is just taking the time to celebrate your victories and understanding that what you think is a big issue usually isn't a big issue. And in my opinion, there are so I'd go back to, 15, 16, where you're going to start facing some of these things. But there are usually three big decisions in life, in my opinion, that allow your decision tree to be much easier. And for me, it was finding the right partner. It was finding the right company. And then it was the decision to raise a family. And by having, and of course, and having these principles that you hopefully will live by. And by doing that, life is a treadmill. It never stops. Those are the big ones that make others a little bit easier if you've made the right decision, knowing that life always has a curveball. So those are a few things that I'd throw. First, let me help myself financially. And then let's give some things that also might benefit little Eric in his growing days.
Yeah, I think the latter is certainly more impactful, because if you are able to do the former and go large on Amazon in 1997 or Apple's IPO, are you able to actually do anything with that money? Are you able to be happy and be a contributing member of society? Which is what the latter part of your message to yourself is really all about. I fully agree with you and many of our other guests when I ask this question. They stress, make the time to celebrate successes, make the time to not that big deal that you think is a really big deal right now. It's in the grand scheme of things, it's really not. So perspective is a skill that I think we can all learn a little earlier. I know I could have done so.
Andy, one thing I did, and I probably, if it was a time capsule, I did it probably, it might have been around the new year. I created 21 principles for my kids. So I have 3 kids, 24, 22, and 19. And I just wanted to have something, as I mentioned, about decision-making and life perspective. And so I created these 21 principles that will help guide you through your journey in life.
Nice.
And they start with family and go to a whole bunch of other things. I'd probably throw that in a capsule back to me as well, that if I had another way to do it. But I think that would be really helpful as you guide your journey.
Yep. So, Eric, we're nearing the end of our time. What's next for you, and where can folks connect with you?
So for me, it's really going into the second marathon of book writing. So first one's actually writing it, which as many people will understand, it's like in thirds. Third of the time it was amazing, third of the time it was okay, and third of the time it was torture for me.
Yep.
And once that was complete, trying to celebrate those victories, right? Learning from what I would try to tell my younger self. And then the next marathon, of course, is really getting your book out. And so been doing some traveling to get some momentum with the book, whether it's a Barnes & Noble retail store. I had some really fun colleges that I certainly couldn't get into support the book, from the Harvards and Yales and UPenns. And I'm doing a trip to the West Coast to Stanford and in that area. So it really is about getting the word out for the book, and now taking that message and impact, hopefully, that I can deliver. I'd love to do and have continued to do some speaking. I think that's where I really enjoy. And of course, if you do things right, individual coaching and other clients can come in. And where you could find me is on LinkedIn is probably the simplest thing, searching for me under LinkedIn. And Instagram, thanks to my daughter, who is a social media guru, and I am not at all. ClearPath Ventures _ we have an Instagram account. And so that's actually been really fun because, here I am, this Gen Xer, and my daughter being a Gen Z, and we've had a chance to have some fun with this book. So that's been a little bit of a treat. But that's really what I'm going to be up to over the next period of time.
Excellent. I love the a third. And having written 2 books, I can attest that the third is actually a thing. And also to all of you out there who aspire to write a book, the writing of the book, as Eric has pointed out, is only half the battle, and it's probably even less than half the battle, because once you get done getting your message out and making the impact and the change on the world that you expect to make before you get started, that's when the hard work really happens. So.
Yeah, I call it, like I talk in the book, from culture carriers to book carriers. You need to get them into the right hands. And so it's great that you might have 1,000 sales, but are they the right 1,000 folks who can truly carry your vision, message, and impact, hopefully, out? So
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Eric, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. You were a fantastic guest, and I am certain that our listeners have learned not just one, but quite a few things from you today. This is the Balancing Act podcast. You can find us on all the major podcast streaming services. Please like, subscribe, rate, and most importantly, share this public good with your friends, with your colleagues, so that we can get the word out about changing and influencing your workplace culture. Have a great day.